Hey everybody, welcome back to CALLOUS Draft League. We've got another Week 2 team draft, and as you can see in the bottom right corner of the screen, almost 1 in the morning when we start this. It's a late one, but you know what? I make sacrifices for my beloved viewers, all 3 of you, and we are going to do this draft. So I hope you guys enjoy it. This is the Week 2 matchup between the pink team, which is going to be Team 1 in this case, on the left, which is Bokk, Cameron, Plzzazz, both of whom I hadn't heard of prior to this tournament, and Freeday, the C player on the left. On the right, we have, hey, appropriately, they are in fact actually the blue team. Who knows how to pronounce that first name? We're going to go with Plzzazz. And ARBY, again, didn't know either of these guys prior to this tournament, but very happy to have you both. And Marshy on the right, a well-known draft player. So Freeday and Marshy player-wise, probably the highlight match, but I also like watching matches of guys that I don't necessarily know as well, so I can make predictions strictly based on the draft with no bias towards the players. So, hopefully you guys have watched 1 or 2 of these already and have a general idea of the rules. I don't want to spend too much time on that. Let's just get into the picks. So we start with 1B in any given draft. They have the double pick, and they are going to open things up with Metagross and Celebi, respectively. It becomes now a triple pick over here. So one person, that would be Plzzazz, has to pick into an opponent who doesn't have any Pokemon yet, and then they can figure out what they want to put against the Meta and the Celebi, respectively. So, okay, real awkward immediately. So, T-Tar, totally fine. Yep, T-Tar into unknown opponent, not an issue. Zapdos, into Meta. I like it. I'm with it. It's good. What is this pick? Snorlax into Celebi? I don't think I like that pick so much. There's a million things you could take in a Celebi here. It could be Aerodactyl, Salamence, Skarmory, Gengar, Starmie, Blissey. There's all sorts of things. Lax into B? A little skeptical about that one. Usually B is picked into Lax as a counter, but apparently Marshy sees it the other way. I mean, when you know it's there, you can go like Curse HP Bug, or you could try to bait it to Leech Seed you and then just like self-destruct on it or something, but I personally would not have picked Lax into Celebi. Marshy sees it differently. I guess we'll see. And then Bokk with the double pick. He's got the option here of Skarmbliss, which I think a lot of people would take. That's a pretty good wheel. But he's not going to do that. He does take Skarm, but he's also going to take Salamence, which I don't hate. And this is into the A player, so this is into T-Tar, so I can obviously see why Mence, whether it's DD Brick Break or whether it's mixed or whatever, can obviously be a threat into the T-Tar. And I certainly wouldn't pass Skarmory back, so I don't hate these picks. Like I said, not that Mence and Skarm have bad synergy at all. They don't. They're pretty good together. But maybe because of the synergy, I would have personally gone Skarmbliss, but I don't hate these picks. I would assume that there's a good chance that Blissey gets picked up on the way back, but time will tell. So triple pick again for Marshy, ARBY, and Plzzazz. And in fact, Blissey does not get picked up, which is surprising to me. So I don't know what Marshy's doing, but I don't agree. He's going to go Raikou, and then we're also going to see Gengar and Starmie here. So Marshy's the one that really stands out to me as weird. I don't like Lax into B. I don't like Raikou into B. Yeah, this does not feel very counter-drafty to me. I mean, again, there might be a plan. It might be like Lax baits out a Leech Seed, self-destructs on the B, Raikou goes nuts. Or it might be it's Curse HP Bug Lax and it's CM Crunch or CM Ice Raikou. It could be targeted at the B. Totally possible. So I'm not like telling you that Marshy has already lost his matchup or something extreme like that. What I am telling you is that these are definitely not picks that I would make, because I think Selby, under normal circumstances, is clearly favored against both of them. That's what I'm saying. For ARBY, he's going to take Gengar into an opponent that he knows has Metagross. Could take or leave it. You could have Will-O-Wisp, Fire Punch, whatever, but it could also be whatever. Lum meta, Agila meta, Psychic meta. I don't actually know if Gengar is that good into Metagross, but it isn't strictly at this stage about what the opponent has. It's also about not wanting to pass certain things back, so that could certainly be a factor here. If you were just drafting against the Metagross, I think you would consider a Bulky Water here, whether you like Milo or Swampert, pick your poison. But they're actually going to pass both Bulky Waters back, which I also find interesting. And we'll go from there. So, Freeday, this pick makes sense to me, is going to scoop up Hariyama into the Lax Drafter. And then it's going to just be Swampert from Cameron, who already has the Metagross. Swampert doesn't necessarily blow me away against Zapdos Gengar, but I mean, Swampert is a good poke, and again, it might be like a I don't want to pass it back thing. But yeah, a couple of these picks so far early on, I'm not sure. These guys might more so than the other drafts be leaning towards either picking for themselves or picking for the sake of I don't want to give this to the other team, but I don't know. I mean, Freeday certainly is, but I don't know that too many of these guys are looking at it yet as a I want to counter draft my opponent, which is, I think, the way to play this format, but it's so new, and maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so the same way that we started this opening round with Cameron, and we worked our way to the right, we're now going to go over to the other B player, which is ARBY, and work our way to the left. So they have a double pick with ARBY and Plzzazz, and that's going to result in Milotic and Aerodactyl. Okay, so the Milotic is into the meta and the Swampert, which I definitely like. Milotic almost always wins the 1v1 against Swampert, and then it's pretty reasonable against meta as well, with the Meteor Mash resistance and the ability to handle basically any mixed set. So I think Milotic is a fantastic pick into, I mean, we don't have a whole team yet for Cameron, but certainly into the Metapert, I think the Milo is a great idea. The arrow here is interesting for Plzzazz. I liked the Starmie pick, by the way, since Bolt Beam, if it is an off-star or something like that, or just T-Wave. Those are all nice sets against the Skarm and the Mence, and he also obviously took a Spinner into a Spiker. As far as Aerodactyl in this matchup, maybe a little bit less enthused, and again, there's always the possibility. Doesn't want it to get taken in the C matchup on the other side, since it's obviously good against both Selby and Yama. Maybe doesn't want the Gengar Zapdos team to play against Aerodactyl. That's all valid, so there might be some element of a protection pick here, but as far as picking it into his own matchup, I could take or leave it. You can beat Mence with Aerodactyl, but it's not guaranteed. DD Mence in particular gets ahead of Arrow. One hit KOs you 90% of the time when you actually connect with the Rock Slide. And then Aerodactyl into Skarm is not ideal either, but if it's like Adamant Arrow, and if your whole team other than the Arrow targets the Skarm, maybe you can punch through. But that pick, while I don't hate it, it doesn't blow me away by any means. So it is now the triple pick for this team on the left, which is the pink team. And they will do as follows. They're going to go Gyarados, Blissey, and Jolteon. Now, the Jolteon I certainly agree with, because the moment that I saw the Aerodactyl, I'm like, oh, this team is kind of electric vulnerable. And honestly, I mean, I could see the Jolteon being picked in this B matchup as well, when none of these Pokemon really like it either. But I certainly agree that Jolteon should have been picked somewhere in this grouping. So they decide to give it to the A player. It's not incredible against Tar, and you're only speed tying rather than winning against the Aerodactyl if you both keep it honest and just go max max. But yeah, I could see why it would have merit in this matchup. Certainly against the Starmie, and it forces the Aero probably to go Jolly rather than Adamant, and it doesn't really switch into the Jolteon, obviously, into a Thunderbolt, into a Thunder Wave, and it gives you a last resort out of a 50-50 coin flip. Just speed tie, try to beat the Aero that way. So it doesn't blow me away in the matchup, but I think it's good in the matchup. Like I said, I liked it in the B matchup as well. So the question is, okay, if you're not taking the B matchup, what is it that you're taking instead? And the Blissey, I think, is an acceptable alternative. It's obviously good against special attackers, which all three of these are. They can have a little bit of play. Zapdos could have random physical moves, Drill Peck, HP Fighting, whatever. It could also try to stall Blissey out with, like, Toxic Protect or Toxic Rest or whatever. It also could pass a substitute to something. Gengar could have Focus Punch or Boom. It's not perfect, but Blissey certainly makes sense to me into the very special heavy team currently that ARBY has drafted. And then Gyarados is an interesting one into Marshy. I could see why you would want Intimidate into Lax, but yeah, I mean, you obviously get fried by Raikou. If you get a Dragon Dance off, that changes completely, and now you one-hit KO the Raikou with Earthquake. So maybe it's as simple as wanting Intimidate into the Lax and having a threat that can one-hit KO the Raikou. Fine. Also has good type synergy with what he already has. I don't know that this pick necessarily is amazing into what Marshy has, but I think it does fit the team that he's building well enough. So with that in mind, I could be okay with the Gyarados pick. It's now going to be on Marshy with a double pick here. And he is going to go for both Moltres and Dragonite. So Moltres seems... I don't know. It's obviously good against Selby, but I don't know that it's good against Hariyama or Gyarados. I have this weird OU team with like Metacham and Magneton or whatever. It's like desperately weak to Moltres and to Mixments. So the way that I combated that was I cooked up this weird Gyra with special defense and rest that like always lives 3 Dragon Claws from Salamence in the sand, and it actually walls the crap out of Moltres too. HP Grass doesn't do it, Flamethrower doesn't do it, doesn't matter if you wow it or toxic it or whatever, it just rests it away, and it actually works really well. I don't know if that's going to be the exact thing that happens here. The point is, if you want Gyarados, it already like mostly beats Moltres, but if you want it to really, really beat Moltres, it can. And then the Hariyama and Moltres conundrum is always interesting. Hariyama always can just carry Rock Slide, which is always going to be a threat to Moltres, but as far as the ability, if you go Thick Fat, you're pretty safe against Moltres. It's not going to kill you with damage, but you're open to Moltres having Toxic or Will-O-Wisp. If you go with Guts, then the opposite is true. Then it's got to think twice about hitting you with Will-O-Wisp or Toxic, because then you go bananas with the attack boost from Guts. But then maybe your one critical hit, Overheat, Flamethrower, Fire Blast, or whatever, which you don't resist anymore, from getting cooked. Generally, the solution is, in fact, to run Thick Fat and then just have Rest or whatever way to heal the Hariyama. Heal Bell, Rest, whatever it may be, get rid of the status problem. And I think that's what we'll end up seeing here, but time will tell. The Dragonite pick I like better, because it's very easy to Frankenstein a set that covers all of this. For example, HP Flying for both Celebi and Hariyama, plus Thunderbolt. Didn't even need the other 2 moves, which could be any number of things with how versatile Dragonite is, but just the threat of HP Flying and Thunderbolt alone covers everything that Freeday currently has. So, in summary, I like the D-Knight pick for sure. Not as sold on the Moltres pick. Feel like that perhaps could have been something else. But that's where we are. So, swinging it back to the right, it's going to now be the triple pick for the pink team. And this is what they'll do. Going to take an early Flygon, but that's into the T-Tire, so I get it. Going to grab Charizard, so Firebird's off the table, and going to grab an earlier than most Glalie. So let's address these one at a time. Like I said, the Flygon pick was specifically into the double rock drafter here, the rock spammer. This is zero surprise, and I think rock resists are going to be very valuable for Bokk, given that he's against Tar and Arrow. I don't know that Flygon is incredible against Aerodactyl with double edge and HP flying. Certainly good against Tar. Maybe there's something to be said about the fact that they're going to know that it's there. It could be like Ice Beam Tar or something, which obviously Flygon doesn't want to deal with. And certainly the Starmie could have Ice Beam as well. So like Double Dragon with the pretty egregious ice weaknesses with zero ice resist at the moment. Certainly might be something that Plzzazz takes advantage of. But I think the mindset is in the right place. You're going to need multiple layers of protection against the Tyranitar, and Flygon is a starting point in that endeavor. For Cameron with the Charizard, I don't know. Zard is a great Mon. I'm a big Zard fan myself, but Milotic really, really shuts it down. I mean, really and truly. There's just no set. I mean, random Toxic Zard, Milotic refreshes it away. Purely Special Zard, HP Grass is like your best bet. It just doesn't do enough. Milotic recovers it away, and what we know will be a sandless game, by the way. Even Belly Drum Zard, even a +6, whatever, HP flying from Charizard does not kill Milotic. So Milo is a pretty damn hard counter into Charizard, so it is strange to me, probably not what I would have done. Again, caveat as always, is there an element of defense to this? Does he not want the Charizard to get taken? Maybe, but Charizard into Milotic is probably not where I want to be, and that's to say nothing of the fact that both Zapdos and Gengar can outspeed Charizard and have Thunderbolt. Charizard is not about to survive a stab T-Bolt from Zapdos, and it may or may not survive one from Gar, wouldn't take it well, and like I said, will be outsped by Gengar. I don't think Charizard makes a lot of sense into Arby's team, so I'm just going to flatly say that I disagree with that pick and do not think that it was a good pick. As far as Freeday here, Glalie into Moltres, little bit weird, but Glalie good into Dragonite. It's okay against Raikou. Glalie, believe it or not, does learn Earthquake, so that could be a thing, I guess. And then it's whatever against Flax, kind of neutral. Get a spike down, click, boom, fine and well. But Freeday is probably correct that his team, as it sits, a little bit too passive. Probably needs ways to move life forward, so perhaps Glalie is the man to do that. He very well may view that as the best spiker available, which I can see why you wouldn't want to take Fori here, given what's on the other side. 3 Pokemon that can all learn Fire Blast. So with that context in mind, there's a Glalie. Whether Fortress gets grabbed elsewhere or not in this next round, great question. Totally possible. I think that Fori is worse in this format than it is in the individual format, because in this, you know it's coming. You can load up on fire attacks, whereas in the other format, it could appear in any of the 3 games, and it's really hard to load up on fire every single game until it appears. So it's probably worse in this than it is in that. Is it better than Glalie? That's a separate question, but Glalie is what he goes for. And rounding out this round, Plzzazz and ARBY, they're going to go for Regice and Heracross, respectively. So it's more Bolt Beam coverage for Plzzazz into somebody who's pretty weak to it. He's got the egregious ice issue right now that he very much needs to address with future picks. And then the Thunderbolt part, obviously good against Skarm. Sure, Jolteon can Volt Absorb it, but it's not like Jolteon wants to come in on T-Wave or Ice Beam either from Regice. So these are pretty good attackers into what Bokk has right now. It's a sensible pick, in my opinion. And I'm fine with the Heracross as well. Pretty good against all of the meta, the Swampert and the Blissey, and it's not great against Zard, though of course Rock Slide again is a one-hit KO threat, but I really, given what ARBY already has, Wouldn't worry too much against the Charizard. He's already pretty damn padded against it. So now, with the third round of picks, we switch back over to Cameron Blazeit, the 1B player, and we make our way to the right and then snake our way back. So with the double pick, Cameron and Freeday, respectively, are going to take Alakazam and Registeel. Alright, so looking at the Alakazam into the B matchup, sure, I can get why you'd take that here. You can outspeed and one-hit KO the Gengar, which is a deadly proposition. You could super duper mega outspeed the Heracross and also one-hit KO it, so that alone is probably enough merit to take Alakazam, but it's not too bad against my low tick either. You could CM on it and start firing away. You could also potentially Encore Lock it or sub up on it if you want to run that kind of set. Alakazam can also outspeed the Zapdos. Think like CM Ice Punch or something. It seems like a pretty real threat against this entire team from ARBY, who, if you think he has a special wall at all, that special wall is Zapdos, which does not necessarily beat Alakazam in a 1v1 situation. And even if you were to say T-Wave it or Toxic it, remember, Alakazam with Synchronize bounces it right back. So the Alakazam pick I like and I think makes plenty of sense in the matchup. The Registeel I like as well. I think that is just another layer of protection that he will need against the Snorlax. It doesn't blow me away against some of this other stuff. It's probably okay against Dragonite. Obviously not good against Moltres. Okay against Raikou. But yeah, he's just trying to layer up, I think, against the Lax. And this is one way to do that. It also gives him a second Rock Resist, which doesn't appear crazy relevant in the matchup. The one thing that I would note about that is that it takes a good Rock Resist away from Bokk, who probably really needs it, but Bokk has multiple issues here. I mean, there's the double Rock Attacker going on that he doesn't have a fantastic answer to, and there's also the double Bolt Beam user that he really doesn't have a fantastic answer to, and I'm not clear what Bokk is going to grab to address those issues, but probably as of right now in the draft, I think that would be the match that I think is most lopsided, probably favoring Plzzazz. I think that Bokk is going to have a hard time resolving the issues that his matchup is having right now. That, to me, is the one that I would feel most confident in if I were in this draft right now looking at the board and trying to figure out where everybody stands. All right, so flipping it around, Plzzazz pretty clearly understands his position. This is a spot-on pick that I can't wait to talk about, but in addition to that pick, it's also Miltank and Cloyster here. But oh boy, on that Porygon 2, is that just the perfect pick. He takes a Trace user into the Flygon, so you Trace Levitate Blank Earthquakes, takes a Trace user into the Jolteon, Trace Volt Absorb Blank T-Bolts, but it's also a third Bolt Beam user, which Bokk is so effing weak to. The P2, I think, is the perfect pick. The only thing that's weird about it is that it adds a third Fighting Week alongside the Regice and the T-Tire, so maybe that's the saving grace for Bokk. Maybe he can grab a couple fighters here and try to do something with that weakness, but there is the Starmie Resist, there is the Arrow Neutrality that generally is going to be good against fighters because, of course, it can hit it with Stab HP Flying. So maybe the fighter plan, easier said than done from Bokk's seat. But I think the Porygon 2 pick, pretty damn spot on as long as Plzzazz does not let himself get overly weak to fighting Pokemon that Bokk theoretically could take here. Miltank for ARBY. That maybe is Zard insurance that I don't think he needs, since it does have thick fat. It gives him a Beller, I guess. And Miltank is just like a general good mon, it's a generalist, frankly, but it's just a general utility mon. I don't know that it solves his biggest problem in the matchup, which I believe right now is Alakazam. I think I would have rather him taken like an Umbreon or an Houndoom or something like that to specifically address the Alakazam. but I don't hate the Miltank. It is a nice generalist, but like I said, gonna have to specifically address the Zam issue at some point, or I think he's very, very likely to be severely damaged or outright cleaned up by that Pokemon. And then on the other side, we have Cloyster for Marshy into Freeday. Yeah, I mean, why not take a spiker? I think this pick makes a lot of sense. I don't like a lot of what Marshy's done up to now, but I do like this pick. You're taking the Cloyster into someone who does not have a rapid spinner. Now, granted, some good spinners, like Claydol, like Forey, are still available, but for now, you're taking Cloyster into someone who doesn't have a spinner, so that's good. And then also, Cloyster, Terabad into Bolt Beam and stuff that has Thunderbolt on the other side, but currently we are pretty empty in that regard. Gyarados does technically have Thunder, but it's not going to carry it, and other than that, none of this stuff can learn electric moves that don't blow. Celebi gets Shockwave, we don't talk about that. Not a lot of Thunderbolt going on the other side. I can see why Cloyster would be appealing in this matchup, and obviously Spikes have synergy with fast, offensive-minded things like Raikou, like Moltres, like Dragonite, any of which could have setup moves or could have Roar. Obviously, they like Spikes. So, the double pick for Bokk before we swing back around to the triple pick for the guys on the right. Bokk, with his double pick in this moment, is going to take Regirock and also Ludicolo. I don't know if that's it. Regirock isn't technically a rock resist, but its defense is so high and it has the rock neutrality to where it like basically counts as a rock resist in most scenarios, so it like kind of sorta shores up the T-Tar arrow weakness. Not enough in my opinion, but it helps. But like between the Skarm, the Flygon, the Regirock, I think he, and I guess the Mens for Intimidate as well, I think he's like somewhat okay against those threats. The real issue that concerns me the most is the Bolt Beam issue, and I don't think Regirock does a lot to address that. It's not exactly switching into Ice Beams from Regice all that often. Starmie, even if you do switch into Bolt Beam, you obviously have to worry about a water attack, so that's not great. Ludicolo helps, I guess, neutral against both parts of Bolt Beam, but Ludicolo is wrecked by status in general, and this team does not have a Pokemon yet that can learn Heal Bell, so Ludicolo is also not a fantastic solution when it switches into T-Wave or Toxic or whatever from Regice or P2. I still don't think that Bokk has necessarily done enough here to address the core threats in this matchup coming from his opponent's end, so I don't know that I love these picks. I don't hate them, but I certainly don't know that these are optimal picks. Still like Plzzazz in this matchup. Swinging it back to the guys on the right. Triple pick for Plzzazz, ARBY, and Marshy. And with that triple pick, they are going to take Teach Me How to Dougie, Teach Me How to Houndoom, and Venusaur. Okay. Could take or leave the Dougie. It seems okay here. If you're really worried about the Registeel, then I guess the Dougie could be an answer. It helps against B, but it's not perfect, and it's not great against the rest of this, but it's the same deal. If you're going rest with Yama, which is what I thought the case would be when you're against the Moltres, then maybe that makes it think twice about resting. Maybe you come in when it sleeps, unless it's rest talk, and you punish it. So there's that. As you guys know, I'm not the world's biggest Dougie fan in general. It certainly doesn't blow me away in the matchup, but maybe it gets played. Maybe it is some use. Doesn't seem incredible to me, as is often the case. And the Houndoom here, picked up by not only the Gengar player to protect his own ghost, but he's also taking that into the Alakazam, which I think is much needed. Houndoom's not great into Blissey unless you have a beat-up set, but it does go pretty well into the rest of this. Obviously, the Fire threat against Meta, potential Toxic, HP Grass, whatever against Swampert. Even Crunches are not the worst. But the key thing here is finding a way to deal with the Alakazam, which Houndoom is certainly step one, but I still wouldn't feel totally comfortable, and I'd probably, if I were ARBY, want another layer of protection somewhere against that Mon. As far as Plzzazz, I'm not clear what the thought process is with the Venusaur. It is a fight resist, which shores up that issue a little bit, but it doesn't seem like Bokk is going that way. He hasn't picked any fighters. It might help a little bit against the Jolteon. And if he's worried about like an offensive Ludicolo, I guess it kind of sort of helps there too, but not clear exactly where we're trying to go with the Venusaur pick. That's the first one from Plzzazz's end where I look at it, and not entirely clear why that pick was made, but time will tell. And then rounding out this round, we have Armaldo and Machamp. Armaldo makes plenty of sense to me. We talk about this, feel like a broken record in this format, but it gets picked by far the most often into Snorlax, and this is yet another example of that. But additionally, Marshy has triple rock weakness in Moltres, in Dragonite, in Cloyster, so certainly grabbing him on with stab rock attacks is a good decision against that team. Armaldo feels like the absolute correct pick for Freeday. I like it better than anything else he could have taken here. No qualms. As far as the Machamp in that matchup, maybe. I mean, Miltank and Houndoom are two fighting weaknesses, so that's a start. Machamp doesn't blow me away into Zapdos, Gengar, Heracross. It's not awful against those Mons, but it's certainly not amazing into them. I could take or leave the Machamp pick. I certainly like it better in the matchup than I like the Charizard, so I think there is a reasonable chance that it gets played. I think you can build like T-Wave Blissey and maybe add another Paramon somewhere and just kind of slow the game down, para some stuff, and let your big hard-hitting threats like Meta, like Machamp, maybe Alakazam in the back as a cleaner, let those things go wild. I could see doing that, though he does have to be careful about going too heavy on the status plan since there is Miltank, which usually carries Heal Bell on the other side. But all that being said, I could take or leave the Machamp pick. I don't hate it. I'm okay with it. So, the final round of picks. We jump over to ARBY again, and we work our way to the left. And we are going to have double Spiker grabbed here. Fori and Smeargle, so late Spikers grabbed in this one. I don't know what it changes about the matchup. ARBY does add a Spiker, and Cameron currently does not have a Spinner, though he, of course, still has time to grab one. And Claydol in particular, that one really stands out, but Claydol still available. Donphan, Blastoise, Tentacruel, plenty of Spinner options if he decides that's important. And then Plzzazz taking the Smeargle. I can see why a team like this would want Spikes. T-Tar loves it, Starmie loves it, Arrow loves it. I get it. I don't know against the team on the other side that he realistically is going to get Spikes down. I think that the team, a lot of this stuff outspeeds and one-hit KOs Smeargle. I think that the team is too aggressive for Smeargle to have too many chances. I might have considered doing this the other way. I might have taken Smeargle in the B spot and Fori in the A spot. I think I might like that better, but they might be looking at it as Fori as a spinner that ARBY needs, whereas Plzzazz already has a spinner in the Starmie. Sure. I'm not sure. I don't think the Smeargle, if it even gets played, is going to be all that effective against Bokk. I think his team is too fast and hits too hard for the most part, but there always will be opportunities. Maybe it gets in on the slower Regirock or on the Skarm or whatever, and gets the Spore off. That's certainly what he's hoping for. The Smeargle may or may not actually end up getting played. We'll see what his last pick is, and then we'll talk at the end about what I think the players will do. So the triple pick now for the red team, and it goes like this. Lantern, Sceptile, and Blaziken. Kind of, sort of the three starters, right? Blaziken and Sceptile, and then Lantern's the last starter in that gen, right? I think it might be. So the Lantern here, yeah, Yeah, I mean, it's actually okay against Raikou, so there's that. It'll never punch through the lax. In fact, it's setup bait for the lax, so that's a big risk. But it is good against Moltres. It is good against Cloyster. It can be good against D-Knight, whether it's T-Wave or Ice Beam, whatever. Certainly don't like it into Lax or into Dugtrio. I'd be a little hesitant to bring the Lantern, but he might be getting nervous about the Moltres on the other side. Not clear. Ultimately, as of now, I would assume the Lantern doesn't make the team because of the Lax and the Dugtrio on the other side, but gives his opponent something to think about in the builder for sure. The Sceptile into ARBY, I think, is a similar concept as the Alakazam. Fast, hard-hitting, special base threat. I don't know that it's as good in this matchup as Zam would be, since Psychic coverage in particular seems pretty reasonable into ARBY, and the Zam, unlike Sceptile, has Calm Mind. Boy, Sceptile would be spicy if it had Calm Mind, but alas, it does not. Grass coverage doesn't blow me away into ARBY. In fact, he has far more resistances than he has weaknesses. He's got the Milo, which is weak, but all of the Zapdos, the Gengar, the Houndoom, the Fori, the Heracross all resist grass, so not super impressed by the Sceptile pick. And Leech Seeders don't seem great either in the matchup. Doesn't look like ARBY's team is all that stally or all that fat. A lot of this stuff has relatively low HP, and you're not forcing a bunch of spikes damage with your Leech Seed because you don't have spikes, so I don't know that the Sceptile pick blows me away. I think it's kind of not a great pick if I'm just calling it as I see it, but that is the pick that he made. Let's see how it plays out. Blaziken in the A matchup, sure. You know what? It hits a hell of a lot. No, it's not great into Starmie and Aerodactyl, but man, does it destroy everything else. Can one-hit KO the Tar, can probably one-hit KO the Regice with Focus Punch, but it could certainly do a fuck ton of damage to it. Super effective Smash on P2, super effective Smash on Venusaur, easy one-hit KO on the Smeargle. It is definitely a threat. I had mentioned all throughout the draft him possibly taking a fighter, and this is probably the fighter to take, given that the fire part is relevant as well. Still don't know that it addresses the Bolt Beam issue, which at this point he's kind of resigned to it just being a thing, but yeah, I mean, as far as having a good offense that threatens the opposing team, Blaziken certainly checks that box. And now we go over to Marshy, who's going to double pick, and then we swing it back, and this draft will be in the books. So with the double pick, he's going to go for Espeon and also Weezing. The Weezing very well might be something of a protection pick here to protect his own lax and make sure his opponent can't grab that. Weezing doesn't blow me away in this matchup. If he's really worried about the Gyarados trying to sweep him and you want to run T-Bolt, Weezing, or something like that, or if you just want to run all bulk haze, Pain Split, sure. It can also be good against the Hariyama, so like maybe he plays it. It could be good in this matchup, but I think he might be looking at it more defensively, not wanting his lax to play against Weezing. As far as the Espeon, maybe. CM Pass, very real, and unlike the other format, it's legal in this format, so CM passing to Raikou, Dragonite, Moltres could be a big threat. There are a couple of Roar, Perish Song, Whirlwind, what have you users on Freeday's team, so he's not necessarily dead in the water to that, but the Espeon getting played is a very real possibility, and CM Pass against a probably slower, stally team like Freeday's, that could actually be a sneaky good threat in the matchup. So, yeah, I could definitely get down with the Espeon and the Weezing picks. No problem. So a triple pick for these dudes on the left. That is the pink team to wrap up the draft. They will finish things off like so. A Tauros, a Claydol, and a Gardevoir. Yeah, Tauros, I just that ain't it. I really broken record, guys. We'll talk about it in a minute. It just doesn't address the bolt beam issue, and I don't think Bokk ever addressed the bolt beam issue. I guess his answer is he's just going to out aggro his opponent, and Toro certainly could do that. He does have a bunch of fast, aggressive, hard-hitting Mons, so that's the plan, I guess. They're just going to go aggro into each other and throw some haymakers, and at the end, only one man will be left standing. Perhaps that is the plan. Honestly, it would not even surprise me, given the amount of Thunderbolt on the other side, and the Starmie, and the possibility of things like Fire Blast Tar, DD Taunt Tar, whatever, and the fact that the Venusaur can outspeed it and sleep it, and the Smeargle can outspeed it and sleep it. It honestly would not surprise me if Bokk benched the Skarmory and just went as fast, as aggressive as possible. I wouldn't be shocked if Bokk's team ended up like Salamence, Jolteon, Flygon, Ludicolo, Blaziken, Tauros. Bench the Regirock, bench the Skarm, all in, turbo aggro. I think that possibility is very real. For Cameron, picks up the Claydol, simply taking what he probably perceives as the best spinner available into an opponent who recently acquired a Spiker, that of course being Fori. 1v1, Claydol does not match up super duper well against Fori. You sit there and eat HP bugs while you don't really do anything meaningful back unless you go HP Fire Doll, which is pretty jank, but I guess you gotta do what you gotta do. And yeah, the Claydol might have random utility against the Zapdos. It's like not the worst into Gengar. It can threaten Houndoom with EQ. Seems later than Claydol should generally go in these things in the very, very last portion of the draft. And yeah, I mean, again, I like it better than Charizard and Sceptile, so maybe the doll will get played. Gardevoir, interesting. Not a poke that's gotten picked too often so far in these weird formats of mine. He's going to take that into Marshy. That is a potential reverse trap on the Dugtrio, because you can trace arena traps. So like after it's already locked on something else, like whatever, EQ, probably. Gardevoir with like an F ton of bulk with some dumb set. Wish, Protect, stall it out, and then just set it up and get a million Calm Minds or whatever. It could be a reverse trap. Pretty niche, pretty janky, but like a cool thing that we could potentially see. And then it, like Alakazam, also has Synchronize if you don't want to go the Trace route, so it could bounce back random Toxics from Moltres or T-Waves from D-Knight. Maybe if Weezing goes for a Will-O-Wisp, it finds itself burnt. It's got some stuff like that, and then Gardevoir itself learns Will-O-Wisp, so could be like a really janky way to try to check the lax. Ultimately, I think the Gardevoir probably does not get played, but it is a pretty diverse Pokemon. It learns Destiny Bond as well. Maybe that's a way to kill the lax. It's got some tricks up its sleeve, so I wouldn't mind seeing the Gardevoir in action, even if I don't necessarily think that's the most likely scenario. And then finally, wrapping up the draft, the two final picks, Plzzazz with a Quagsire, and then ARBY adding Dusclops. So Quagsire into the A matchup, maybe just a smidge more insurance against the Mence and the Flygon in particular. Maybe feels like he needs to add a proper Rock Resist. Not that Quagsire is exactly amazing at that, but kind of slim pickings at this stage of the draft, so maybe between the fact that Salamence, Flygon, Blaziken, Regirock all learn rock moves, maybe he thinks he's a little bit vulnerable in that department. I don't know that Quagsire be-all, end-all solves that issue, but it's more than nothing. Perhaps Quagsire has a shot of actually making the team, and Bokk's best bet might be rock spamming and going turbo aggro. Maybe Quagsire can help in that regard. On the other side, for ARBY here, going to go for Dusclops, which is generally pretty good at blocking Claydol from rapid spinning, and it also gives him a little bit more against the Alakazam, which I think is desperately needed because ever since it got picked, I think the Alakazam has been the biggest threat in the matchup. The Houndoom helped, probably not enough on its own. The Houndoom Dusclops combo, hopefully, is enough for ARBY to get there, but I still think, under the right circumstances, Alakazam could be a real threat. Not like Dusclops takes Psychics or +1 Psychics all that well, and Zam, if you really want, can be EV to survive Shadow Ball from Dusclops. The Dusclops helps for sure. I don't think he's dead in the water to Alakazam anymore, but I still don't know that I would be entirely comfortable with it if I were in ARBY's position. So that's our draft, and this is a wonderful time for you guys to get into the comments section. Let me know who you think won this draft. As always, would love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to hit the like button and that subscribe button. And let's talk about what we've got here. So in the A matchup of Bokk versus Plzzazz, you know, you might be surprised by what I have to say because I've been harping this whole time on Bokk for not having Bolt Beam answers, which don't get me wrong, he sure doesn't. But I think that Bokk ended up just being so aggressive and his team is so fast, and I don't necessarily love some of these late picks for Plzzazz. I don't think the Smeargle is that useful in this matchup. I don't think the Venusaur is that useful in this matchup. I don't think Quagsire is just that great in general. So I think that Bokk had the better final portion, maybe final half of his draft, and that's kind of shifted the perception for me. Yeah, the Bolt Beam issue still present, still real, but a lot of the stuff that would be using Bolt Beam is slower than the stuff on the other side, and is stuff that is very much pressured by what's on the other side. So, for example, if you have Regice, yes, it can threaten Bolt Beam, but it may be staring down something like Blaziken or like Tauros or like Salamence that can really, really damage it if you are slower and want to attempt one of those moves. I don't feel as confident in this matchup as I did before. I really like Plzzazz's end of it for the first little while, but I don't know that I still feel that way. And I feel as far as cohesion, I feel that Bokk's team probably came together a little bit better, just kind of coherent aggression here, whereas Plzzazz has some kind of redundancy and some weird typing stuff going on. I can't believe I'm saying this because I liked Plzzazz's draft so much better early on, but I'm actually going to predict Bokk to win. And I would make a side note that I think, like I said, I think the Skarmory might actually end up on the bench. I think we might end up with Salamence, Jolteon, Flygon, Ludicolo, Blaziken, Tauros, cut the slow guys in the Regirock and the Skarm and just go turbo aggro. I think that's going to be his best way to win. And that'll be my prediction. I'll say that Bokk takes it down. Don't feel tremendous about that prediction, but I got to make one, so that'll be it. In the B matchup, Cameron Blazeit versus ARBY. I can go back and forth with this matchup. I didn't like the Charizard pick. I still don't really like the Charizard pick, especially for how highly it was taken. I really don't know that it's going to be all that effective. I don't even know if you should bring it. I like the Sceptile pick even less. With no spikes, it's not that exciting. Sandless game, it just doesn't hit hard enough. It can't boost unless you want to count Pataya, which I don't. Grass as a typing doesn't seem that great into ARBY. So I liked Cameron's draft early on, and I certainly like the Alakazam, but I feel like some of these later picks were meh, were only okay. The Zard and the Sceptile really killing me. The Sceptile, I don't get at all what he was trying to do with that. So I'm not sure. I really liked the start, but I feel like it kind of fizzled out for Cam. As far as for ARBY, his team is maybe not the sturdiest in the world, but I don't know that this is the kind of matchup where he's going to get punished for that. There's not that many hard-hitting, relevant threats. One thing that stands out immediately, obviously, is the Metagross. It's kind of Zapdos and Milo only to deal with it. I guess, like, to a lesser extent, Fori. but Zapdos and Milo theoretically should be enough. There are some situations where the meta gets scary. If you're really worried about it, I mean, you can really tech out against it. Miltank, it can have T-Wave and try to do something there. I guess where this matchup really, really goes wrong is something tragic somewhere happens to the Milotic, it gets crit, it gets frozen, whatever. Then the meta maybe gets out of hand. But as a whole, I think Cameron doesn't have enough threats necessarily in this matchup. I'm going to give the advantage in this one to ARBY. I think Cam's draft kind of fizzled out at the end. I do really like the Zam, but I do think that ARBY did an okay job of addressing it at the end. The Houndoom Dusclops combo certainly is going to help matters. Again, I don't feel tremendous with this prediction. I don't think it's a stomp, but gun to my head, got to make a prediction. I'm going to give the advantage in this one to ARBY. And now the feature match, if you will, the two most established players for each team in this draft anyway, out of these three. It is Freeday and Marshy. What a weird draft for Marshy. It mostly came together, and Freeday didn't go too wild, exploiting that pretty glaring rock weakness on the other side. But man, I really didn't agree with several of Marshy's early picks. The Lax and the Raikou into the Celebi is interesting, and I didn't love the Moltres in the matchup. As it turns out, it's probably fine. I don't think it's great or terrible. It probably ends up getting brought at least, but I think there's enough over here to neutralize it. The Armaldo is probably way more obnoxious than it needs to be. Marshy doesn't seem to have a fantastic answer for that. Maybe Wheezing is the answer for that, but even then you risk getting knocked off or double switched on. I do think the Wheezing was a nice pickup at the end. I think that that's a poke that Freeday doesn't really have a fantastic answer for. Maybe Celebi goes with some aggressive set, some like CM Psychic set that obviously would give Wheezing a hard time. Gardevoir can do the same thing. But Wheezing just like flinging status around, and hell, it could be a bad Gengar, it can even learn like Wow Taunt, could actually be pretty obnoxious for Freeday. The issue that I have with Freeday's team is a severe lack of wind conditions. He can spike, but there is a spinner on the other side, and he doesn't have a ghost to even try to protect that. And then as far as actually winning, you can have some kind of offensive Celebi, but I don't think that bodes well into the Lax or into what could be a DD Knight or some kind of mixed Knight or whatever, so I don't know if that's your answer. Also, Dugtrio would eat it. Hariyama can do damage, but I mean, it's not a win condition. Let's be realistic here. Even if it is an offensive set, it's not a proper win con. Gyarados is maybe his best bet. I think Marshy has enough on the other side to deal with it, whether it's the Wheezing just being physical bulk plus haste plus Will-O-Wisp, whatever. If you're really worried about it, you can go with T-Bolt Wheezing. I think that Dragonite can also have T-Bolt. I think that Cloyster can tank any hit that even +1 Gyro wants to throw at it, and then click Explosion. I think overall he probably has enough for the Gyra. In the right circumstances, maybe Gyra goes nuts and gets the job done, but I think as long as Marshy brings all of the Knight, the Cloyster, and the Wheezing, which I think is probable, then I think he'll have enough to deal with that. And when you get beyond that, when you realize that the Celebi really can't be offensive in this matchup because it gets walled to shit by the Snorlax and gets eaten by the Dugtrio, when you realize that the Celebi can't be balls to the walls offense and that Marshy does have enough to neutralize the Gyarados, I don't know what that leaves you with. I don't know how Freeday really wins the match. I think he has drafted an overly passive and overly reactive team that's going to have a hard time winning games. So I'm going to predict Marshy to win there as well. So I guess my official prediction here, not that I feel great about any of them, but my official prediction is a 2-1 blue team victory by way of Bokk defeating Plzzazz. However, ARBY over Cameron and Marshy over Freeday. But as always, guys, I mean, I'm just one guy. There are many different perspectives and ways to look at this format, so I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments. And as always, I appreciate you guys watching the video. Almost 2 in the morning, gonna head to bed soon, but there will, of course, be more content in this format coming soon to a Callous Narrates YouTube channel near you. Have a good night.